What is up, everyone? Welcome to Doop on the Volley, Philly Sports Network's Philadelphia Union and Soccer podcast. We're here for another episode talking about the Philadelphia Union, and it's unfortunately yet again another loss at home. But yeah, we're gonna get into it. I'm Tim Lovingoth here with my partners tonight. We got Eric Freisinger. Eric, how's it going, man?
It's going. I'll have a better answer for you after tomorrow night. That's yeah, okay. You know, it's the union. The union are unioning. It's just a version of unioning that we haven't seen for a while.
I was literally just about to say that, like, for a portion of the audience who watches this podcast, like, they're probably like, what do you mean? Like, the team hasn't gone on like a 20-game winning streak where they're scoring 7 goals. This doesn't look like the Union. But no, like, for the Union that we used to see back in, what was it, the mid-2010s? Yeah, this seems interesting. It's actually, we've actually seen something that hasn't happened even way back then, and we'll talk about that later when we get into the Orlando game. But we have Paul Frenzel here as well. How's it going, Paul?
Union-wise, it could be better, but other than that, doing pretty well.
Yeah, man. Hey, well, that's good at least. I mean, Eric and I were talking before we went live here in our little pre-show meeting that, yeah, like, the Union aren't doing well and everything else just seems kind of crappy all around. So, like, hey, at least, you know, if things are outside of the Union verse for you aren't crappy, that's great. And welcome into relitigating all the crappy things that have happened in the last few weeks for the Philadelphia Union. We get to start things off by talking about last weekend's match at home against Orlando City, a team that had come in and was at the basement of the Eastern Conference, not at the very basement, but down there and not doing too well. And it seems like when teams aren't doing too well, they just need to come to Subaru Park, which is not something that we really like to talk about much. But the game kind of started off a little bit better than what we've seen in the past, with the Union scoring first. Mikel Ua in the 12th minute there getting a goal, and it looked like the Union were kind of going to go on the front foot. And then they let Duncan McGuire get one, and then Luis Muriel right before halftime, and then right after halftime to make it 3. Daniel Gazdag did get a penalty, and he scored that one, at least the first one, and then he missed a potential game-tying PK, which is just so Union. But I guess, Paul, I'll throw it over to you first. What were your first reactions from yet another home loss?
So I'll start off by saying, so I was actually in the Sons of Ben for the first time this season.
Oh, nice.
With my friend. So I got the true experience. He sits front row, basically right behind the net.
Oh,
wow. Life was really good for the first 10 minutes. Union were on the attack, like you said. Ura scored, and I was like, it's finally over. It's like the streak of whatever was happening is finally over, and then, you know, it fell apart just all of a sudden. But we asked if the sky is falling. As a soccer fan, I'm gonna be negative and be like, yeah, it is. I don't really see any way that this. I mean, it's weird to think because the offense looked good on Saturday night, but the defense just hasn't looked good all season. So it's rough. We're in rough times right now.
Yeah, man, it's definitely an interesting time to be a Union fan. Eric, first takeaways from this match before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty about it.
Yeah, I mean, somehow it managed to follow the same pattern, even with changing things up a little bit. Unlike Paul said, scoring first was a very nice change of pace. It didn't last long, but it was nice. But it was really just the same issues that we've been seeing. Giveaways in the midfield, not closing players down. enough. I think Jimmy was the one tweeting about it, that Jim Curtin had talked a little bit in his press conference about how we're allowing a lot more goals from outside of the box than we usually do. I mean, we went all of 2022 without allowing one.
Right.
So that, I think we tend to talk a lot about the defense, but I think that goes to show that a lot of the defensive struggles have been, at least in part, down to the midfield.
Yes.
And that continued in this game. So it's frustrating for us as fans. It's got to be frustrating for Jim Curtin and the coaching staff to have these same problems just repeat over and over and over again, because he's gone over this stuff in practice, on film study, all of this with the players, and it's got to be driving him crazy that we keep seeing these same mistakes. So yeah, that's kind of my kind of broad kind of takeaway from the game. Less necessarily about the game itself and more just about the general patterns.
Yeah. I mean, just to go back to what Jimmy tweeted from the press conference, I found it, I pulled it up. Curtin says that 8 goals have come from outside the box in MLS play, and 11 in all comps, including CCC. So that's a handful of the goals. And when you think about the Union have conceded 30 from 15 games all competition in the season, Curtin keeps using the phrase, "It's not us." But it's been 15 games. So like, I don't know, like that's what I struggle with. Like, I know like in the ethos of the Union right now has always, or at least the last few years, has been compact defense, then springing counterattacks and trying to find the spaces kind of out wide to create chances. But the defensive aspect of that is not hitting right now. They're just not playing very well at all, and this kind of leads into where I wanted to take this. I wanted to kind of break down the lineup from this match and see if there's kind of anywhere we can make, if we put our coaching hats on, like what kind of changes would we make? And I think the easiest place to start is the back line. We've been talking about, we'll get to the midfield and how some of the goals are coming from outside the box, but we've seen different center back pairs for I don't know how many games this season. Yeah. And I know that Jim Curtin never used to kind of coach that way. He always used to, stick with Glesnes Elliott. And then the only time that he would rotate is when one of the center backs was hurt. And he said in press conferences this year so far that the reason that he's kind of went away from that is to kind of save some of the center backs' legs as the season goes on, but it's really hurt the consistency of the center back pairing. At least that's my take on it. So Paul, I want to throw this over to you first. From this match in Orlando, we saw Glesnes and Damian Lowe together, and I believe that was the same pairing from DC. Let me just check.
It was correct. Yeah,
it was. Okay, so that was actually interesting because that's kind of consistency there. But we saw 5 goals from those 2 games go in. So what's your take on Lowe and Glesnes as a pairing right now, and would you make any changes?
Obviously it's not working. 5 goals in 2 games. I know, and they're very uncharacteristic goals of the Union to allow. I would put Elliott in. I know, what's his name? I know Curtin said something about Elliott not playing on Saturday because he's starting tomorrow night.
Okay.
So we will see Elliott in tomorrow night, which I think. I know last podcast we talked about the Union going back to the basics. I think that is exactly what we need to do. So I'm really excited that Elliott is sliding back in there. So I think it's going to be. I'm praying it'll be an improvement. I'm thinking it will be an improvement. So I do think the defensive struggles, more specifically, I guess, El Brujos have made some big mistakes this season that have caused a lot of goals. But I do think I would replace Elliott with Lowe for the upcoming time until they could get things figured out. Yeah.
Eric, are you feeling the same on that?
Yeah, and we kind of talked about that, like Paul said, we talked about the getting back to basics in the last podcast, and how I think all 3 of us last time had said that we wanted to see that Glesnes Elliott pairing. I get holding off on it for 1 game, but clearly there's just something not quite clicking with the partnership with Lowe and Glesnes. And it's weird because I feel like both of them have, and particularly Lowe, have had some really good individual moments of play.
Yeah.
It's just that together, that's, like I said, something not quite working there. And we know that Elliott and Glesnes can get something working. Although even when they've played together so far this season, things have been a little iffy. But again, like you guys both touched on, that could partially just come down to lack of game time together, with all the rotation. So I think it's a good opportunity because Elliott hasn't played for a few games, and because we gave up 5 goals in those 2 games, to come in and really stake a claim for keeping a starting spot, is particularly now that there's less need to rotate.
Right.
We're not really participating in any other competitions because we're out of the Champions Cup and the MLS wants to destroy the Open Cup. So I think it's a good. I'll focus on the positive and say it's a good opportunity for Elliott to really get in there and make a difference.
Yeah.
Off the top of my head, do you guys? I don't remember. Have you guys? Has there ever been an Elliott Lowe pairing that you guys have known of?
I thought Elliott Lowe
like this season.
I thought there was a few games ago. Maybe like
I think there was.
I'm trying to think.
Let me see. I'm trying to see if there was. Not in the last 5 games where we've been winless here. Let's see if it was. I'm just going back through the games real quick. So the last time that Elliott and Lowe played together was actually at Nashville, but the Union started in a 3-5-2 that game. So they had Glesnes there as well. So that is an interesting take there, Jimmy. Or Paul. Wow, I said Jimmy. That's because Jimmy just commented here. He's might be on his way here. He's coming home from work, but he did say that he noticed that in the locker room people were frustrated, and Jim says that the team is confident that they can come out of it and dig out of it. Jillian concurred as well, that she noticed it too, that Mikel and Damien both said things that like teams go through these phases and that they can bounce out. And we'll talk a little bit more about things like that as we kind of get into if we really think the sky is falling. But I wanted to kind of switch things up and talk a little bit about the midfield from this game, because I think this is where I see a lot of the issues, like you were saying, Paul, where El Brujo just seems to have, I don't know if he's just in a funk or what it is, but there seems to be times where he'll get on the ball and instead of making the right pass out of pressure, he'll want to take 1 or 2 touches and it's one too many, and then he gives up the chances that turn into a goal. Or even his support system next to him, like we know Jack McGlynn is a good outlet all the time, but when you switch from Bedoya and Sullivan, who like to be more wingers, it just seems like Brujo is taking it upon himself to kind of create and move toward that right side. So Paul, I know you kind of said your piece on it a little bit. Eric, how are you feeling about that? Like, do you think there's any kind of changes that the team can make with Brujo coming off the field, or does he need to be in there and just kind of figure these things out?
That's a good question, because he didn't start the game against DC after his mistake in the previous game.
Yeah.
So, and that was a clear message being sent by Jim Curtin. Really, I think what the team might need, I mean, obviously we need him to stop giving the ball away, but having Flock back, I think gives us at least the potential to bring back some of that defensive stability in the midfield that we had, particularly in 2022, because we saw them together a lot that season, and that's when our defense was really, really good. So the problem is Flock likes to play on the left side of that midfield diamond, and you can't really bench Jack McGlynn right now.
You can't.
I mean, I guess you could throw one of them on the right side of the diamond, but then you risk them feeling a little more uncomfortable, which, as we've seen a few times this season when the players are uncomfortable or like just not used to things, they struggle. So
Yeah.
I don't know what the solution is, but I'm not getting paid the big bucks to come up with the solution. And so I'll just say I don't envy Jim Curtin having to figure that one out, because really, other than the defensive stability, the rest of the midfield, or really, I should say, the two wide parts of the midfield diamond, have been consistently pretty good.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of regardless of who's played there. Whether it's McGlynn, Flock when he played decently, especially when you consider it was his first game back in months and months. Bedoya and Sullivan on the right side have played well. So yeah, we got to find some kind of balance, but I don't know what the answer is when everyone feels so undroppable.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. I think the things that you guys were talking about with Leon Flock and how he does like to play on that left side. I think one solution could be to go back to a formation we saw a little bit in 2022, but mostly actually back in 2021, the 4-2 or 4-3-2-1, the Christmas tree formation, where there's kind of the midfielders in the middle where you'd still have Brujo there. You could have Flock as like more of a defensive cover, and then probably I would say more of like a Bedoya or a Sullivan as like a player that could go out wide from a deeper position. And then at the 10s, you would probably play Gazdag, and I would move Jack McGlynn up there because of his playmaking ability. We know that he really likes to have the ball at his feet, and he can, pull those strings. So that would work well. And then it's just the case of what do you do with the strikers? Do you play Julian Carranza? I mean, that would be my first thing, is that he's the best pressing forward, I think, in MLS still right now. So I think you would play him over Mikel Ua and use Ua as a super sub, which is kind of crazy to think of. But I think that could be a solution moving forward. But yeah, I don't know. We do have to talk about, and as Jimmy's kind of bringing up here, that all three losses at home, the Union have had over 50% possession. So a lot of teams are kind of sitting back and letting the Union kind of come to them, which we've seen in the past doesn't really bode well for the Union. They like to have less possession and be that counter-attacking team. But it is interesting. Jimmy brings up the three losses at home. And we do have to talk about an interesting stat here. This is the first time the Union have lost 3 consecutive games at home ever in their history. They did lose 3 league games at home back in 2012, all the way back then. But in the midst of that, they were in the Open Cup, which unfortunately they, for some reason, can't play in this year because of stupid reasons. And they did win that match against the Rochester Rhinos, which
RIP.
Classic. There. So this is the first time ever the Union have lost 3 games in a row at home. And it's just, I guess now is the best time to bring it up. I know, Paul, you already said it. You feel like this sky is falling. Eric, what do you think? Is this really the downturn of this Union season, even though we're only about a third of the way through the season?
It certainly feels like it. Yeah. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think so much comes down to the players' ability to turn things around defensively. Because if we look at some of the offensive numbers, they've been pretty good. We've been, in terms of like chances generated and stuff, we've been in the top half of the league. It's just kind of our offense being up here and our defense being down here kind of averages out to being perfectly average, which is what the Union's record is right now. And I still think, we talked about this a little last week, I still think it's easier to fix defensive issues than it is to figure out how to score goals when you're not. Mm-hmm. And that, more than anything else, gives me optimism. However, that optimism starts to dissipate very quickly as we go longer and longer without fixing those issues. because even when we were still undefeated, we were seeing these same issues.
Yeah.
We were just, through a combination of luck and hard work, not getting completely punished for them. Now we are, and nothing's changed. And that makes it hard to be optimistic, but at least until tomorrow, I'm going to continue to be optimistic that they'll figure it out, get things right, and start shooting up the table.
Yeah. I mean, that's what the club thinks, at least right now, as we saw from Jimmy and Jillian's comments from the post-game presser the other night. The team believes that they can pull themselves out of this, and especially Jim Curtin, if you've heard his last few press conferences, he keeps reiterating that this is not us, and we'll see if that's true as we kind of go forward. The reason I kind of wanted to bring up this question is I've kind of been putting my thoughts to paper for a little bit here over the last few weeks. Actually, I've been trying to construct an article for Philly Sports Network that talks about like if this is actually the time, like to check the vibes, like are the vibes are off. We know that, but is the sky actually falling? And it's kind of interesting. Of the timing of all of this, because I know Jonathan Tannenwald at the Philly Inquirer put out an article today where he interviewed Jay Sugarman a while back, and the things from that article are just kind of telling about the club's ambitions. For those who didn't read it or didn't see it, here's just a little synopsis. I won't give away too much of it, so you can go read it. But basically, the ambition with the club in terms of players is that if they find the perfect player, they're gonna maybe go spend some money on it, but it can't block a rising homegrown. That's kind of the sticking point of the club, with the ethos being homegrowns. I get it, but at the same time, it's almost like handcuffing yourself. At least that's my thought on it. The thoughts on the stadium is that the club is looking to expand the stadium, but might not happen anytime soon. They were just getting consultants out, so that's kind of the end of that talk, at least for the off the field stuff. And they feel like they have a lot of talent in the pipeline, especially with the academy right now being where it is. But it's a long ways away from being at the first team if it even reaches that. So essentially, what that whole article talks about, what Jay Sugarman talks about is, well, we're trying, but we don't want it to block our mentality or our homegrown mentality, things like that, and basically put it on Jim and Ernst to find the right people to fit that mentality. So that kind of brought up some of the things that I have been writing about that you'll see soon on Philly Sports Network. It isn't 100% ready yet, but it'll be out there soon, about the ambition of the club and where it goes from here. Because we've seen the club, go out and sign Kevin Sullivan, and they're bringing up this next crop of homegrowns, but it looks like the current crop might be on its way out and going to Europe. So it's like that in-between time. And in that in-between time, it doesn't look like they're going to find a lot of players to replace those players, at least based on some of the comments that might be taken out of context. We don't really know. But what are your guys' thoughts on the ambition of this Union club moving forward, especially right now when the vibes are not so good? I'll throw this over to Paul first.
So my first thought, I've been looking to compare the Union to a Premier League team. I've been trying to find their comparison. You guys can give me your thoughts. My first thought is this new future for the club reminds me of Brighton. They spawn. I feel like they spawn wonder kids out of nowhere, and then they sell them on for. They really don't buy play. I mean, they bought Pedro, of course, João Pedro, but other than that, you really don't see Brighton spending the money and bidding the players. They're more of like, I guess you could call it a feeder club, more specifically for Chelsea only, it seems. But I think it's a weird situation. I understand the way they're doing it. The MLS is there to develop young players and send them over to Europe. But at the same time, with the teams like Miami coming in here and bringing in Messi, Busquets, Suarez, you just had LAFC announce Olivier Giroud.
Yeah.
I think it's time that you can still concentrate on your homegrowns. But I think it's time that you should try to get some big name players, especially in a market like Philadelphia sports market, which when our fans are winning, you see where like top fans in the country. It might be a little biased, but that's just me talking. So I feel like Sugarman should be out there to spend some money. I know you hear some fans on Twitter have fans in the stands. They're screaming to spend some money.
Yeah.
So I guess it's just I like the vision that Sugarman has for the club, but I feel like you could change it up a little and start spending some more money.
That's an interesting take. I like the comparison to Brighton. It's interesting because the Union do seem like they want to be a club that plays young players and then sell them on. Real quick, Jimmy just gave us the direct quote from that from Sugarman's quote there. If they ask for a player, we'll consider spending the money as long as it doesn't block the homegrown, is the direct quote.
Oh,
so he asked, is Sugarman not even being asked by Jim and Ernst? That's an interesting question and take. Eric, I'll throw that over to you. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a little bit of possibly a communication breakdown of some sort or miscommunication. Maybe Jim and Ernst were kind of just assuming that certain players they wouldn't even bother asking about. And it's possible that those players that they may know the general ceiling for how much we're willing to spend. I say possible; it's probable that they know the general ceiling for what the team is willing to spend, and it's probably not super high, at least not as high as what certain teams are spending on seemingly multiple players at a time, which is interesting and. Some cases weird. Miami, how do you fit all these? But yeah, so I think really there's probably more communication going on than that quote makes it sound.
Yeah.
And it's probably just a way of kind of skirting around the issue. I mean, like, oh, if they ask for it, of course we'll try to pony up the money. And then they're like, well, we know how much you're willing to spend, so we're just not even going to bother asking.
Yeah.
Thinking about teams in England that we seem like, honestly, it feels a little more like Southampton might be a more apt comparison. Because I think Brighton is bringing through all these wonder kids, but they are buying them.
That is true.
First, they have a very, very good scouting network. They're buying them young, high potential. Whereas Southampton, it feels like, is bringing more players through their own youth ranks. And what happened to Southampton? Because they're not in the Premier League anymore. So that's a worrying sign. And also the idea of not blocking the homegrowns, I find interesting because yes, that makes sense. And I get that you want them to have a chance to play, but you also can't be relying on them, not just because it's hard to get them to deliver, but also it's not good for their development to be playing all the time, 100% of the minutes. You want them to play, but not play too much. And you can't be relying on them because mentally in a lot of ways that kind of pressure that early on can hamper the development. And obviously some people would make the argument that, oh, if they want to be at the top level, then they need to be able to handle that kind of stress or pressure or whatever. But if the Union are going to get anywhere, they need some of these homegrowns coming through who aren't going to be at the top level and who are going to contribute to the team for a long time. You need those multiple levels of homegrown players coming through. You can have superstars, and that's great. And having these guys go over to Europe is great because it raises the profile of the club. And obviously, while they're here, they're contributing, and they're contributing from a young age. But you still need that next level down of players who are going to be maybe really good MLS players or even just like regular contributors off the bench or things like that. And right now it feels like we're missing that level. And I'm sure it'll come. But again, you can't rely on 18-year-olds to be driving the team. And Jimmy, I see, is making a good point as well.
Yeah.
It is counterintuitive to not block homegrown, but plan to sell them at the same time.
Yep.
Because then you're relying on having that constant churning out. And even the best youth teams in the world are not churning out players at that kind of rate.
Right.
Like you can't reliably generate players for every position or even most positions on a consistent basis every 3-4 years if you're selling them off.
Yeah.
You need to be willing and able to bring in players who might provide some competition at certain places for those youth players, because as we've seen and as people talk about time and time again, that kind of competition makes both players better.
Yeah.
And again, eases that burden on the young players and gives them someone to learn from.
Mm-hmm.
You need veterans to teach these young players maybe even less about stuff on the field, but more off of it and how to be a professional. And that, more than a lot of other things, is, I think, key to developing into the kind of player who can contribute, whether for the Union or for a team in Europe, for a long time to come. Anyway, that was a lot.
No, it's fine. I mean, it's true though. I mean, and even what Jimmy said, it's counterintuitive to not block a homegrown, but then try to sell them. But at the same time, if you look at how the Union have used homegrowns, like you've said, Eric, since the first real big crop, I would say, of homegrowns that really broke through was your Anthony Fontanas and your Austin Trustees. Those were the first two. They played for a while, but they didn't really work out with the Union. And then Austin Trustee goes on to go to Colorado and then now have a very good career in being a Premier League center back. So like maybe that should have kind of matured a little bit. Second crop, Brendan Aronson, Mark McKenzie, helped the Union win a Supporters Shield, MLS Best 11s. Then they were both sold to Europe, which I guess was the ideal Union backbone. They wanted them to be here to win a trophy and then to leave right away and go play at other leagues. And then the third crop has sort of had a mixed bag where it was Paxton Aronson, who sort of followed his brother's trajectory, even though the Union didn't win a trophy in 2022. They were very close 2 times, but failed. And then the players who are still on the team and who are the backbone, I would say, of the Philadelphia Union right now, Jack McGlynn, Nathan Harriel, and Quinn Sullivan. All 3 of them across almost all 3 lines of the field players. Like they're the ones who are almost your pendant starters right now. And as you said, Eric, they need some time off. It's actually really interesting that you brought that point up. So I was at the match on Saturday as well, sitting in the river end as I usually do to get some good video and everything. And after the game, as I was leaving, Quinn Sullivan was walking off the field and he walked basically onto the fan concourse. He was going to see family, but he was just exhausted, like mentally, physically exhausted, because he's played pretty much every game, every minute for this whole season. And it, like, the toll that this downturn is taking on him, like, if there's another player who can be as useful as Quinn Sullivan, we're not asking for a giant DP player like Giroud, like Messi. Like we're asking for the club to go and find those, TAM players that can come in and be a veteran mentor to players like a Quinn Sullivan, who's emerging as a star right now. And I think that's kind of where the disconnect has been. And that's what Jimmy just brought up again in another comment. He'll never stop thinking about what a veteran from Europe with the right leadership could do for these homegrowns. Ali Bedoya times 10. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, what the Union should be looking for in transfer targets, is looking for a veteran to come in. And that's, I think, what kind of gets kind of lost there. Like, they're not coming in necessarily to take all of Jack McGlynn's minutes on the left side, but if there's a midfielder who could fit the role as that veteran leader like Ali Bedoya without running Ali into the ground like we've seen the club do, that would be awesome as well, and just give a little bit more depth. So I mean, we've talked about the ambition of the club a little bit. It's kind of taken a little bit of an interesting dark turn about Jay Sugarman quote. Before we kind of move on from it, do you guys have any final thoughts on just the ambitions of the club and how we think they can kind of maybe possibly, I don't know, pull out of the sky is falling mentality that the fans and everyone else seems to be clamoring about right now? Paul, I'll kind of throw it to you. Do you have any final thoughts on that?
The only thought is in the summer, like Jimmy said, I feel like you need to get that proper European veteran. Obviously not someone who's played for a top club who will be a free agent. So unfortunately, no like Casemiro's or Varans or anyone.
Yeah.
But I guess mid-table guys that they've been in the Premier League, they've been in top leagues, they know what winning football, soccer is. Bring them over here to this team would be absolutely massive for everyone involved with the club.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because right around that, when that transfer window opens is when a lot of the current Union players that have been the kind of the backbone and those like star players will possibly be out with their national teams. So it's like there will be need for players that have that know-how to kind of come in and they could kind of get their footing and become important players without becoming every game starters. I think that's sort of been kind of lost in the shuffle with this team recently, is that the important players right now seem to have to play every game for the team to really excel. And it's just, that's not realistic in the way a club works. So Eric, just any more final thoughts? I know you went on your rant already, but if you want to add any more to it, feel free.
Oh, I've got something. Something. Don't you worry. If there's a myriad of issues facing the team right now, but if you want to energize a fan base, you make a signing that people know.
Yeah.
We also want veteran leadership. Maybe someone who can play a bit of midfield, maybe someone who can also put in a shift at striker.
Okay.
If Jay Sugarman wants to prove that he'll put up the money for someone, if the team directs it, go for Marco Royce.
Oh,
bring in Marco Royce. He's one of the bigger names I think that we know is going to be a free agent this summer. Obviously, other MLS teams are probably already trying to sign him.
St. Louis, yes.
St. Louis,
yeah.
They've got enough.
They already got Berkey. Berkey wants Royce, and that's probably how it's going to go.
That is probably how it's going to go. But you know what? We've got a couple Germans on the team. Send them.
That's true.
Use them as ambassadors. Like Jimmy said, having more Bedoyas. And particularly one who's, going to be in the Champions League final, would not hurt for these young guys. And like I said before, you want to bring in young players, get them the veteran leadership who's going to help them grow.
Yeah.
Bring in Marco Royce, tying everything together there at the end with Sugarman's quote and everything.
I love it. And
that would be scenes.
It would be, and we'll see what happens. That side of the club has seemingly, for the 15 seasons that the Union have been around, has sort of always been this shit show. Like that's what it's been. It's always been asking for star players and not being able to shell out the cash, or the club showing ambition and going out and getting a player like even back when they wanted Maurice Adu. And MLS was like, well, you can't get him right yet, but we'll get him soon for you. That kind of thing kind of slowed things down. And then eventually Bedoya was the next big name player, I would say. But we'll see what happens. I feel like the Union are due to bring in some players with that quality in a summer window. Ernst Tanner and the summer window haven't been always a good combination, but we'll see what happens this time around. But guys, we do have a midweek match tomorrow. So how are we feeling about NYCFC? But real quick, Paul, you got an admirer right here. Paul is such a cutie. Look at this comment right here. For those listening, you can't see it, but it's.
I know exactly who that is.
There you go. we don't have to give it any more screen time there. But there you go. How are we feeling ahead of this NYCFC game? I know we've heard about press conferences and other things like that. But Eric, I'll throw it over to you. Just first initial thoughts, like how are you feeling ahead of this NYCFC game? What do the Union look to do here?
I think Paul mentioned, it may have been before the show, that NYCFC are in pretty good form right now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not nearly as optimistic as I foolishly was before the Orlando game. That being said, it would be a very Union thing to do, to go out and just somehow like kick ass and dominate this game and win by a lot, which, you know, we always kind of hope for against NYCFC. Some of us are still bitter about 2021.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not expecting much, but there's definitely a small part of me that is hoping that means they'll surprise us.
Yeah. Paul, first thoughts about this NYCFC match. What are you looking forward to, if anything, here?
I'm just looking for improvements everywhere, to be honest. I guess the best part about what's going on is my expectations won't be high anymore. So really any positive thing that happens will excite me. But I guess something that I'm looking forward to, I know this is on the NYCFC side, but Andres Pereira and Matt Freese will be making their return to Subaru Park. And I was a big Pereira fan when he signed over, and obviously it didn't work out. And he looks like he's been fitting in really well with NYCFC this season. So I am excited to see him come down and see how the Union game plan around that aspect of the field, especially with the way their midfield has been struggling so far this season. But similar to Eric, I'm not really feeling optimistic about the match as much as I want to. I would love to say we'll win, but in reality, with the form NYCFC season, they have 12 points in the last 5 matches, 9 goals for, 5 against. I don't know. It's tough. I really think that they'll end this horrible home streak. I don't want to see them lose 4 in a row at home, but at the same time, NYCFC, I had them as one of the big sleepers for in the East this season.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was feeling that too. I don't know what I was on, but I think I had NYCFC like finishing second in our preseason predictions. I don't know what I was on, like I said. But that, you know, their recent run of form, I guess vindicates that. I don't know. Like Paul said, they've won 4 of their last 5, and they've looked very good on the pitch, specifically in the middle of the field. Now I know, 4 or 5 of their last 6 games have been at home for them, so they've been playing in a field that is not actually a soccer field. So you know, that you'll maybe put a little bit of asterisk on their matches there. But I think a lot of what this game will come down to, as we've seen so far in most of the Union games this year, is the midfield shape and things like that. So I want to start there and kind of just go right into our lineup predictions on how we feel the Union lineup in midfield, because I think we've already talked a little bit in our recap of Orlando how we don't really know how Jim Curtin is going to respond from this 3rd loss at home in a row. So Eric, I'll throw it over to you. Do you have a starting 4 that you're thinking of? Does Curtin switch up the formation? What do you think it's going to look like here?
I think he might drop Brujo again. I mean, he dropped him for a game, brought him back in, and the very next start, he does essentially the same thing. I think we could see Flock get some more minutes.
Yeah.
I'm thinking we see a midfield with Flock, Bedoya, McGlynn, and then obviously Gazdag ahead of them. But yeah, and I think it will be the diamond rather than like the 4-4-2 that we saw the last time we saw those players line up in midfield.
Yeah, no more Flock on the left wing. That's probably a good idea. Yeah. I mean, I get dropping Brujo. it's still just hard for me to like fathom right now. But the form, I think, kind of dictates it. So we'll see how that kind of plays out. Paul, do you have a prediction on who we'll see in the midfield and how they kind of stack up against NYC?
I similar to Eric, I really don't want to drop Brujo, but I feel like you need to after these sloppy mistakes he's made I guess you could say the last couple matches.
Yeah.
I feel like he always gives a ball up away in midfield somehow, and then it always leads to a goal. But I would love to see Flock there, but I also would love to see some Jesus Bueno minutes.
Interesting.
They
Okay.
haven't been really used a lot. I feel like if out of the two, you would see more Flock in that position than anything. In reality, I would love to just see a formation change, but I would love to see the Union just go to a 4-2-3-1. I think that would fit them well, but with the comments of Curtin talking about how good of a performance Ura had in his last performance, I really don't see them going to one striker. So midfield-wise, I see him sticking in the diamond, and I'll go Gazdag at the 10, McGlynn, Bedoya again, and then as CDM, I guess I'll go Flock.
All right. You guys are in agreement there. I don't know. I feel like it's so hard to drop Brujo right now, and we saw that even when the team did that they didn't really perform much better. So I think they're going to keep him in there. And I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. I think I want to see the Christmas tree. You put more players around Brujo that can give him a little bit more cover, make things a little bit more congested for teams who are apparently scoring golazos every week against us from outside the box. So I think what I would want to see is that Christmas tree formation with Brujo in the center of it, and then Flock on one of the sides. It doesn't matter right or left. I guess for just consistency's sake, I guess you play McGlynn there, even though I said earlier I would want him as one of the 10s. I would put him there just to kind of keep it a little bit more consistent, where in a spot where he's kind of been in the past. And then at the 2 10s, I think I would want to see Sullivan and Gazdag, which then would leave one striker. And I know Curtin probably isn't going to do this, but I would just play Carranza and then have Ua as a super sub to run at tired defense. But I don't know. I don't think it's actually going to happen. And as Jimmy kind of told us just here, Pereira did score the winner against Tirana, so he probably will get minutes against us. So I don't know if that kind of stifles his ability to go box to box. But we'll see how that kind of plays out there. Rolling right along with the predictions. We kind of talked about it already a little bit, but what do we see happening with the backline and goalkeeper? We heard from Jim Curtin today in his press conference. Andre Blake is still going to be out for this match, even though he's listed as questionable on MLS's injury report. So they're holding him out for this game. He's just still not there yet, which is kind of interesting because Eric and I talked before the show about how the next 2 games after this home game are away at New England and away at Charlotte, and both of those games are on turf, and you don't know if you want to risk Andre Blake to injury on turf, re-injuring anything. So that's interesting. We know it'll be Oliver Semla in goal, that means. But how are we feeling about backline? Jim Curtin also mentioned Olivier Mbaizo is back in training. I don't think that right back has really been much of an issue. But Paul, I'll throw it over to you first. What are you seeing on the back line there?
I'm going to go Kai at left back, of course, and then I'm going to do Glesnes, Elliott, Ariel.
Okay. Eric, do you have any disagreements there, or do you think it's going to be the same?
No, I think it's going to be exactly the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think so too. Even if I was playing around with and changing the formation, that would be the back 4 that I would roll out. I think that's the Union's best back 4 as of right now. I do think Damian Lowe can play himself into that role at times, but his recent run of form has just not been that great. We've seen him make too many runs forward and get out of position, and then you leave players like Brujo on an island, and he's not been doing well with that either, trying to cover for the center back. So I think Glesnes and Elliott will get that start, and we'll see how they can if they can get back to that pairing that they had in 2021 and 2022. That would be really cool to see for the Union. That just leaves our questions now and predictions for up top. And Paul, I know you said Jim Curtin was talking about Ua and his very good performance that he's had. We know Julian Carranza will be fresh coming off of suspension there. Do you think that it's going to be those 2 up top, Paul?
I do. Yeah. I would love to. I don't think Sullivan will play up top, of course. You might see
Yeah.
him slot in the midfield. But at the same
Okay.
time, I really feel like you said, he looked really tired. I saw that
Yeah.
as well. I think you need to give the kid some rest, even if it's just 45, 50 minutes on the bench. You can bring him on in like the 60th, 55th minute around there, even though Curtin really doesn't do some subs in that area.
Yeah.
Seems to forget about subs in general, but I won't get too much into that. But yeah, I think it'll be Ura and Carranza.
Yeah. Eric, do you think the same way there, or do you think Sullivan still plays?
No, I think the same way. I think Carranza's our best striker. Was weirdly, in terms of scoring, at least, our most informed striker. He's scored last game, like he's scored the goals more recently.
Yeah.
So I think you go with those two. Give Sullivan a rest. The thing is, I have trouble seeing Curtin actually not starting Sullivan.
Yeah, I agree.
So it's almost like a bit of a hybrid of what I would do versus what I think will happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you go with those two up top.
Yeah, I agree with you. If it's a 4-4-2, I agree with your guys' lineup. If Curtin does want to get fancy and change the formation, I don't think the back three is worked out this year. So I think a Christmas tree would work well. But that does mean benching one of Ua and Carranza, and I don't think Jim Curtin's going to do that right now. Real quick, before we get into on the volley takes and predictions and anything like that, we did just get an interesting comment from Alex here. What do you think they have to do to turn it around and raise a championship trophy? We talked about how some of us feel like the sky is falling. Some of us feel that it's not falling just yet, but it could be soon if things don't turn around. How do things make a complete 180 and end with the Union winning one of the trophies that they can play in this year, either it being MLS Cup, the unrealistic supporter shield chase that is Miami's at this moment and probably forever. And then, unfortunately, Leagues Cup that we have to endure in the hot summer months. Eric, I'll throw this over to you first. How do you think the Union can do it?
Marco Royce. No.
Royce. I mean, honestly, though, that might just be it.
No, I think really it all just comes down to tightening up defensively. Stop letting in these goals. And like I said several times already, getting the midfield to stop giving the ball away and kind of leaving the defense caught out.
Yeah.
And also stop letting players score for the first time this season. Because a lot it keeps happening game after game. A player who hasn't scored this season scores against us. So stop doing that, and we'll go a lot farther.
Paul, do you have an answer to this question about possibly winning a championship this year, as however unlikely it is right now?
I think Eric nailed it with defensive. You got to fix the defensive problems. The attack hasn't been an issue at all this season, in my opinion. They score their goals. And like Jimmy said in the comments, Curtin said these run of games will be the first time that Carranza, Gazag, and Ura, they're all going to be healthy together. And I think that is something that's extremely important. When you have those three guys healthy, all playing together, the Union are one of the top teams in the league if everyone plays like it. So I feel like if you get to the defense to allow 1-2 goals a game, I'd even be happy with 2. At the rate they're playing. I feel like you can get back on track. And I was looking at the standings, actually, and if we do win this game against New York, we will be level on points with them. Yeah. So NYCFC. So I guess, like I said earlier, the sky really isn't falling completely. It's just my hot take right now. You win tomorrow night, and things are a whole lot different.
It's true, and it's interesting because we've been saying that for almost the past month. Because I mean, if you look back, I think you guys mentioned this on the last podcast that I wasn't on. I was really, really trying to push at the end of April how the Union could be in the mix for supporter shield if they could just win their games at home, and then they went on to lose 3 in a row at home. So sorry for the jinx there, everybody. I won't be saying that now. But it's just crazy to see how one win can really change everything and turn things around, like you just said, Paul. And I think it's time then for us to jump in and give our on the volley takes. I know a lot of us have been pretty pessimistic this pod, but we can go either way with these on the volley takes. It doesn't always have to be optimistic. So, Eric, I'll throw it over to you. What's your on the volley take for this match against NYCFC for the Union?
Oh man, that's a good question. I'm gonna say Brujo comes off the bench and scores.
Whoa. Okay.
Really to come back with a vengeance. And bonus, because I was just thinking about this that none of us brought up in terms of the Union turning around and winning a championship. Bonus, more season longer, like lengthier on the volley take. The team needs to not sell anyone vital over the summer.
Yeah, that would be great.
So my bonus one will be that they won't.
Okay. Fair enough. Jack McGlynn, you are here for another half season. That sounds amazing.
Sell them in January.
Yeah, I would be down for that 100%. Paul, how are you feeling? What's your on the volley take? I know you just gave your hot take about the Union, possibly moving up the standings, being tied with NYCFC. But what's your on the volley take here for this match?
So I think that we're going to see improvement, but we're not going to see the full improvement.
Okay.
I'm going to say they're going to draw. They're going to get a draw tomorrow night, which I think with everything that's been going on, people will be, I guess, depending on how the draw happens, if it's a 1-0 lead and they let up a goal in the 90th minute, people won't be happy.
Right.
But I think overall they're going to show improvements that we're looking for, but basically show that they're on the path to being back to the team that we know they can be. And I'm going to say a really on the volley take is that we're going to have a defender score.
Okay. I like it. Who do you think gets that goal from defense?
I'm going to pick Jack Elliott in his return to the lineup.
Okay. I like it. I like that because he can score off a set piece, but then also he has been known to have a sneaky free kick, and I really hope it's that one where like you expect like Jack McGlynn or Kai Wagner to smash it, or even Glesnes, but then Jack Elliott is standing over there, and you're like, Jack, what are you doing? And then he just like he places a perfect shot into the top corner or something. Like that would be amazing. I think for me, my on the volley take is that we're just going to see the Union kind of get back to their basics. I think I've given it a little bit away that I'd love to see the Christmas tree. So I guess my on the volley take is that we might see that formation change with no, Jim Curtin hasn't said anything like that. And his press conference almost kind of contradicts that. But I think that would just be a way to solidify things in the midfield and help the defense out and stop conceding all the goals, like you guys said as well. But we probably won't see that. But that would be my on the volley take, is that Curtin changes the formation, that it works for once. That would be great. And maybe a few more subs as well, because there is a game on Saturday as well. So that would be great to see. I know we haven't done that too much. Yeah. Jimmy just came in here with his take. He predicts a 2-2 draw. Break the losing streak, but don't get the win. Gazdag and Carranza. On the volley take is Barabo gets more minutes, which is something that Jim Curtin said before the start of last game, was that Barabo was impressing him in training. And we did see him get on in the 90 plus whatever minute, because somehow we went this whole podcast without talking about there were 15 minutes of extra time in that Orlando game. I think I just blocked that out of memory because I just don't want to think about the Orlando game anymore. But there were 15 minutes of extra time, and Barabo did come on the field. That is very true. So hopefully he does get more minutes, and maybe he can make a little bit more of an attacking impact as a substitute there. Real quick, guys, before we end this podcast, any final thoughts before this game? Any other kind of crazy takes you want to throw out there before we sign off? Eric, I'll throw it over to you. You got anything else left in the tank for tonight, or do you think that we're just going to have to wait and see what happens tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm kind of waiting to see what happens. Trying to drum up some semblance of optimism.
Fair enough. I totally understand that. Paul, anything from you, or is it all just kind of the same stuff? Just hopelessly optimistic right now?
Yeah, you win you show improvement tomorrow, makes happy. But if you lose again, I don't really want to be talked to for the next week until Saturday.
That's fair enough. And speaking of Saturday, I know we haven't talked about it as a group, but there will be a Union away game this coming Saturday up in New England. So that will likely be our next podcast time. When there are away games, we like to kind of give a pre-game show feel, whether it's in the afternoon or a few hours before kickoff. Do come back and join us, all the almost 300 of you here in our chat following along. Please subscribe wherever you can, either on Twitter, on Instagram. If you get if you listen to podcasts on Apple, Google, and Spotify, give us a like and follow us there as well. But until next time, we have Eric, Paul, and I'm Tim, and this has been Doop on the Volley. So we'll see you guys soon. Have a good night.